This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we finished yesterday with, what did we finish yesterday? The SAR, correct? Yes, we have finished yesterday with the SAR of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Okay, we next move on to the mechanism of action of these carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. So take down mechanism of action. Mechanism of action. The carbonic anhydrase enzyme is of two types. The carbonic anhydrase enzyme is of two types. Type 2, Roman number 2, type 2 Ca, that is carbonic anhydrase. Type 2 Ca, which is present intracellularly. And type 4, Roman number 4, type 4 Ca, which is present near the brush border membrane, near the luminal brush border membrane, near the luminal brush border membrane. Next line, carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, carbonic anhydrase inhibitors target both these types of carbonic anhydrase enzymes. Both these types of carbonic anhydrase enzymes. Next line. Along with this, they also target the intercalated cells. Along with this, they also target the intercalated cells in the collecting tubules. The intercalated cells in the collecting tubules at site 4. At site 4. Next point. CA inhibitors decrease the availability of H plus ions. CA inhibitors decrease the availability of H plus ions, which are going to be exchanged, for sodium ions in the luminal fluid. Next point in the mechanism of action. They also inhibit the CA. They also inhibit the CA at the brush border membrane. They also inhibit the CA at the brush border membrane. At the brush border membrane from producing carbon dioxide. From producing carbon dioxide. Therefore, reuptake of bicarbonate ion. Therefore, reuptake of HCO3 minus or bicarbonate ion decreases. Okay, leave a line. Since carbonic anhydrase enzyme has been inhibited from acting, since carbonic anhydrase enzyme has been inhibited from acting, from reabsorbing sodium at site 1, the entire load of reabsorption of sodium from the luminal fluid increases on the next 3 sites. Increases on the next 3 sites. Especially on site 2. And to some extent on site 4, where at the loss of potassium ions, sodium ions can be exchanged. Okay, so this is a disadvantage that happens when you are using a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. Now at the first site, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor is present at 2 sites. It is present at the brush border membrane, and it is also present intracellularly. Now both of the sites of the production of carbonic anhydrase, that is intracellular as well as the brush border membrane, both are inhibited. Now when both get inhibited, that time what is going to happen? The reabsorption of sodium is going to stop. Okay, why? Because H plus ion production by the enzyme has been stopped. So there will be no H plus ion left, H plus ion to exchange for sodium. So the reabsorption of sodium at site 1 will decrease automatically. Okay, now the body will sense at this point of time that something has prevented from the body to reabsorb the normal 60% or 70% quantity of sodium back into the nephrons or back into the glomerulus, and it has moved away in the luminal fluid. Okay, so the body will now try to compensate as to how can you get back all the sodium that you have lost or you have failed to reabsorb from site 1. And in the process of doing so, that is, in the process of reabsorbing sodium, the other pressure will mainly come on the next 3 sites, especially site 2 and site 4. And at site 4, what is seen is when the loss of or the reabsorption of sodium is done on a very large scale at site 4, simultaneously there is loss of potassium ions. Okay, so that means sodium is coming in and potassium is going out of the cell. And in this process, what the CA inhibitors cause is they cause loss of sodium, because at the first site sodium has not been reabsorbed. Okay, so there is natriuretic activity. Then it is also causing loss of bicarbonate, HCO3 minus ions. So it has a bicarbonatriuretic activity. That means NaHCO3, these two ions, Na and HCO3, will not be reabsorbed. And because the pressure is now fallen on the fourth site, site 4, where there are collecting tubules, because of that, the potassium ions are getting lost, and the whole thing is called as kaliuretic, means potassium ion is also moving out of the body. So this becomes a sort of a disadvantage. The overall activity of CA inhibitors is it is natriuretic, means it causes removal of sodium ions. It is kaliuretic, it causes loss of potassium ions. It is bicarbonatriuretic, which means NaHCO3. These two ions in combination are lost from the body into the luminal fluid because you have used carbonic anhydrase inhibitor as a diuretic drug. Okay, have you understood, all of y'all? We have first seen the mechanism of action of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors at two places where the enzyme is present. The enzyme is present intracellularly and at the brush border membrane. And the enzyme is able to prevent the loss or reabsorption of sodium at both the sites because H plus ion is not formed. Okay, now because H plus ion is not formed, sodium will not come inside. Now because of this effect, the body will sense that you are having a loss, you are not able to reabsorb sodium. So the body will start pressurizing site 2, 3 and 4 for the reabsorption to happen. Okay, and when you are trying for the reabsorption to happen, you are pressurizing the body at site 2 and 4, and in this process you are causing loss of potassium ions from the body. Okay, so the overall summary of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors is they are natriuretic, that is they cause loss of sodium, kaliuretic, and they are bicarbonatriuretic. And because of this tendency of having a diuretic activity, these drugs belonging to the class of CA inhibitors are used in the treatment mainly of glaucoma. Okay, and the most famous drug from this class is acetazolamide. It is also used in the treatment of, as an adjuvant, it is also used in the treatment of epilepsy. Okay, and this is the synthesis of acetazolamide. Can you see the synthesis? Okay, if you can see the synthesis, please note it down or please take a screenshot, whatever you want to do, and let me know so that I can continue. Shall we continue? Let me know once you are done taking down the synthesis. Yes, sodium is getting reabsorbed, but when the function is not happening at site 1, okay, then because it is not happening at site 1, excessive sodium will be reabsorbed at site 4. So if you are reabsorbing excessive sodium, you are going to lose excessive potassium from the body. Okay, so in a normal case, if you were losing say 4 sodium ions in a day, but because you are using a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, you are putting pressure on site 2 and 4, and instead of reabsorbing 4 sodiums, it will reabsorb 4 lakh sodiums ions. So if 4 lakh sodium ions are going to get reabsorbed, you are going to have a loss of 4 lakh potassium ions. Is it clear? So because of the pressure, there is excessive loss of potassium from the body, and you know loss of potassium can lead to hypokalemia, and in fact potassium plays a very important role when signal transmission has to happen between two. Okay, so the parent drug from this class of thiazides or chlorothiazide is chloraminophenamide. Okay, this is the parent drug from which you started getting the diuretics of the class of thiazides and thiazide-like diuretics. This parent drug, chloraminophenamide, is developed keeping in mind the different disadvantages that are there associated with carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. And one of the biggest disadvantages is that it puts pressure on the site 2 and 4, and it is causing the loss of potassium, excessive loss of potassium from site 4 because of using carbonic anhydrase enzyme inhibitors. Okay, so chloraminophenamide was then made to undergo acylation, or you can say it was made to undergo two different types of reactions. One is with acylating agents and the other is with aldehydes and ketones. Okay. And when it was made to undergo reaction with acylating agents, it gave what are called as thiazides, and when it was made to undergo reaction with aldehydes or ketones, it gives hydrothiazides. So these are the two subgroups of thiazide diuretics, that is thiazide diuretics or thiazides and hydrothiazides. So the examples are also different. There is chlorothiazide, and then there is hydrothiazide, which is an example of the aldehyde and ketone treated chloraminophenamide. Okay, so take down. Thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics. Thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics to do away with the undesirable property, to do away with the undesirable property of CA inhibitors, that is carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics, thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics was developed. The parent compound of this class of drugs the parent compound of this class of drugs is chloraminophenamide, is chloraminophenamide. Leave a line. Chloraminophenamide, when made to react with acylating agents, chloraminophenamide, when made to react with acylating agents, gives thiazides, gives thiazides. Next point. Chloraminophenamide, next point, chloraminophenamide, when made to react with aldehydes or ketones, give the corresponding hydrothiazides, give the corresponding hydrothiazides. SAR, You can take down the structure of this chlorothiazide. Once you have taken down the structure of this chlorothiazide, start numbering it. This SO2, this S is number 1. This is 1. This is 2. NH is 2. This empty place is 3. And this nitrogen is 4. Okay, so this again becomes 5 where I have placed the cursor. This is 5. 6. The chloride part where you are attaching the chloride. This is this is the 6th position. And the second sulfur group is at position number 7. Okay, so you start from this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. This is for chlorothiazide. Okay, similarly take down the structure of hydrochlorothiazide. Here the numbering is already given. The numbering is already given over here. Okay, have you taken down both the structures, chlorothiazide and hydrochlorothiazide? Let me know once you're done. Okay. So in SAR, take down the first point. Second position, nitrogen. Second position nitrogen, that is this one where NH is there. So this is the second position nitrogen. Can tolerate presence of small alkyl groups. Can tolerate presence of small alkyl groups like CH3. Okay, now if you see the third position, here it is empty. You can substitute whatever you want. And this, whatever you want that you will substitute on the third position of the thiazides or hydrothiazides, it will decide the duration of action. Okay, if you have a very highly polar group attached at this third position, the drug will remain binded in the body for a very long time. The duration of action will be long. However, if you have a hydrophilic group attached at this third position, it will be soluble in water, the main drug, and it will remove the drug out of the body system very easily. Thus, it will have a shorter duration of action. Okay. So, the next point, substitution at the third position. Substitution at the third position decides the potency and duration of action. Decides the potency and duration of action. Next point, absence of a carbon-carbon double bond. Absence of a carbon-carbon double bond between third and fourth position. Here, this double bond. Absence of a carbon-carbon double bond between third and fourth position increases the potency of the drug. Increases the potency of the drug by 3 to 10 times. Increases the potency of the drug by 3 to 10 times. Next point, substitution of an alkyl group. Substitution of alkyl group at fourth, fifth, or eighth position. At fourth, fifth, this is fourth, this is fifth, or eighth position. This is 8. Substitution of alkyl group at 4th, 5th and 8th position decreases diuretic activity. Decreases diuretic activity. Next point in SAR, substituting an active group at 6th position. Substituting an active group at 6th position is essential for diuretic activity. Here, chloride, bromide, here, chloride, bromide, CH3 minus and NO2 minus Okay, so we have now finished SAR. We'll move on to the mechanism of action of these thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics. Now, if you recollect that in the site 2, where there is reabsorption of sodium taking place, along with sodium, one atom of chloride is also reabsorbed, and along with that, two atoms of one atom of potassium and two atoms of chloride. Okay, so for every one sodium ion, one potassium ion and two chloride ions are reabsorbed back from the luminal fluid. Okay, so this mechanism of action where there is co-transportation of chloride along with sodium, this will be stopped by the thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics. This co-transportation will be blocked through the channels or through the pathway from which it was coming. And when this reabsorption of chloride or this co-transportation of chloride with sodium is blocked, or it is stopped, then there will be diuretic activity, because the sodium will be retained in the luminal fluid, and along with sodium you will see that the chloride ion is also getting lost in the luminal fluid. So your thiazide-like diuretics, they have an effect on the sodium. It causes sodium loss. So has natriuretic effect. They have chlorouretic effect because it causes loss of chlorides. It has kaliuretic effect also because it also causes the loss of potassium ions from the body. Okay, so it is a very simple mechanism of action where only the co-transportation has been blocked. Okay, and again, like on site 1, the once the sodium reabsorption has been stopped, it has been stopped because of the use of a diuretic agent. The load is increasing on site 2 and site 4, and if you are using a site 2 acting diuretic agent, then the load even more increases on site 4. Okay, so somebody had asked me this question that any which ways sodium was going to get reabsorbed, with that potassium also would have got lost. So how does it make a difference? The difference is not this is a regular routine. The quantity of sodium that you are looking at, okay, when you are when there is a diuretic activity happening, where there is loss of sodium from the body, and with that sodium chloride is also going, bicarbonate is also going, then the quantity of the ion matters. How many ions are losing out because of this particular action. Okay, so this is the mechanism of action of thiazide and thiazide like diuretics. Take down. Mechanism of action. The thiazide-like diuretics, block the reabsorption of sodium, at site 2. Sorry, site 3. At site 3, that is the distal convoluted tubule. That is the distal convoluted tubule. They do so by blocking the sodium chloride co-transportation system. They do so by blocking the sodium chloride co-transportation system. This class of diuretics are natriuretic. This class of diuretics are natriuretics, chloruretics, kaliuretic, and also have a weak bicarbo natriuretic activity. Bicarbo natriuretic activity. Leave a line. Because sodium and chloride reabsorption has been inhibited at site 3, what did we write last? Somebody tell, what did we write last?
Because sodium and chloride reabsorption has been inhibited at
site 3, the load of sodium reabsorption increases on site 4. And therefore there are chances of potassium loss at site 4. Okay. Take down the synthesis of chlorothiazide. Meanwhile, there is a question in the chat box. I will answer that. So Zoveria says that we are wanting to have or we are wanting to stop reabsorption of sodium. Yes. Okay. You are not understanding, Zoveria. When your body is seeing that there is no reabsorption of sodium happening, your body will try to compensate it by acting somewhere else. Okay. If you are taking a drug which is acting on site 1 and you are not allowing reabsorption of sodium happen, you are having a diuretic activity, the volume of urine has to be increased. Now, is that the only site in the nephron where sodium reabsorption can happen? No. There are 3 more sites after that where reabsorption of sodium can happen. Okay. Now, if it does not happen on site 1, your site 2, 3 and 4 get alert that we have to compensate. Okay. Not so much site 2, but more of site 4. Okay. Site 2 you can still manage, But at site 4, the problem over here is that even if reabsorption is happening, you are going to lose sodium, you are going to lose potassium. I repeat, in normal circumstances, when you are not using a diuretic agent and your kidneys are functioning properly, in that case, when 4 ions of sodium are lost, 4 ions of potassium are retained. There is a equal ratio. Okay, your body can adjust to the loss of 4 ions of potassium. But when the entire load of reabsorption of millions of sodium ions shifts from site 1, 2, 3 to directly to site 4, okay, number 1, site 4 does not have so much of capacity. Number 2, even if it has the capacity, it is going to cause heavy loss of potassium ions. Okay, it is something like, because you are going to fast tomorrow, you are going to eat more today. Okay, so if you are going to eat instead regularly, if you are eating 4 chapatis per day, because you are going to fast tomorrow, you eat 10 chapatis today, you are going to have a upset stomach. Similarly, when your capacity to reabsorb sodium itself is 4 and you can afford to lose only 4 to 6 ions of potassium, and here you have a huge task of reabsorbing some 10 millions of sodium ions and then lose 10 millions of potassium ions with them. In this case, it becomes a disadvantage. Please try to understand, Zuveria, what I'm trying to tell. Okay, this is your body is trying to compensate. Now you do not use a diuretic single-handedly, as in no one single diuretic agent is used. You will always have potassium sparing diuretics given. If you are given thiazides, chlorothiazides, or you are given acetazolamide, or in that case you will be given a potassium sparing diuretic which will not allow the potassium to get lost. A potassium sparing diuretic like spironolactone. Okay, this spironolactone potassium sparing diuretic we will be studying. This will not allow the potassium to get lost from the body. Okay, thereby not leading the body to hypokalemia. Otherwise, what is going to happen? If you are not using a potassium sparing diuretic, then what is going to happen is here you are not allowing reabsorption of sodium at site 1 or site 3. Then there is excessive load on site 4. The body is looking at compensation. The body does not understand that you are taking a diuretic and what is the use of a diuretic, and you have a swelling in your legs or your kidneys are not functioning properly. The body will not understand all these things. What the kidneys know that I have to reabsorb sodium. Now, if one part of the kidney or one part of the nephron has not done it properly, it has to get compensated somewhere else. So in this process of compensation, the body is leading itself to hypokalemia, which you cannot afford. That is why when you prescribe a thiazide or a chlorothiazide, or when you prescribe a acetazolamide, you have to prescribe a potassium sparing diuretic so that potassium loss from the site 4, the collecting tubule, does not happen. Is it clear to everybody? Not only to Zuveria, to everybody. Is it clear? Yes. Okay. If you still have not understood, I'll explain again. Anybody who has any other confusion? Okay. You don't seem to have any other questions are there? Okay, fine. So with this, we have finished thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics, their SAR as well as their mechanism of action. We next move on to what are called as loop diuretics or they are also called as high ceiling diuretics. And in fact, these are the most safest and they are the most used diuretics which are acting on the loop of Henle or on the ascending loop of Henle. And furosemide is one of the drugs which belongs to this class, and it is very rampantly used as a diuretic agent. Okay, so these loop diuretics, they have a very diverse chemical structure. One type of a high ceiling or a loop diuretic is 5-sulfoamyl 2-aminobenzoic acid. Okay, I repeat, it is 5-sulfoamyl 2-aminobenzoic acid, and the other is 3-aminobenzoic acid. Okay, so in one type of loop diuretic, you can have the benzoic acid substitution, or you can have the acid COOH group substitution. You can have at the second position, or you can have it at the third position. Both of them, either on the second position or on the third position, aminobenzoic acids in general have excellent diuretic activity. Okay, so we have this class of aminobenzoic acids, 2-aminobenzoic acids and 3-aminobenzoic acids. You can see on your screen, this is the 5-sulfoamyl 2-aminobenzoic acid class which gives furosemide, and the 5-sulfoamyl 3-aminobenzoic acid class which gives the drug bumetanide. Both of them have very good diuretic activity. Only the positioning of the aminobenzoic acid here in this class and in this class is only changing. Here it is in the second place. Here it is in the third place. Okay, so next we move on to high ceiling diuretics or loop diuretics. Take down high ceiling diuretics or loop diuretics. This class of diuretics have diverse chemical structures. Okay, you can take down the structure of 5-sulfoamyl 2-benzoic acid and 5-sulfoamyl 3-benzoic acid. Only take down these two structures. 5-sulfoamyl 2-benzoic acid class, 5-sulfoamyl 3-aminobenzoic acid class. Take down both the structures. Now where you have taken down 5-sulfoamyl 2-benzoic acid, below that take down the example furosemide. Take down the example of furosemide. And that under 3-aminobenzoic acid, take down the example of bumetanide. Okay. Now, if you compare both the classes, you will see the numbering starts from this amino acid group COOH. Here it is the first position, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Okay. And in this case, it is 5-sulfomoyl 3-aminobenzoic acid. Here the numbering starts at this position, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Okay. So here you have the amino group at second position. Here you have the amino group at the third position. Okay. That is the difference. Then in both the cases, sulfomoyl group is at fifth position only. X is at the fourth position. Okay. So these are the only, this is the only difference, the amino group placement. So take down SAR. Substituent at position 1 must be acidic. Substituent at position 1 must be acidic to provide optimal diuretic activity. To provide optimal diuretic activity. Next, sulfomoyl group should be at position 5. Sulfomoyl group should be at position 5 for optimal high sealing diuretic activity. For optimal high sealing diuretic activity. Next point, the activating group X, should be at position 4 and it could be a chloride, a phenoxy, it could be chloride, Cl, phenoxy, CF3, alkoxy, benzyl or benzoyl group. The activating group X should be at position 4 and it could be a chloride, CF3, phenoxy, alkoxy, benzyl or benzoyl. Okay, this is the SAR for high sealing diuretic agents. Now, how your thiazides and chlorothiazide inhibit co-transportation. Furosemide and bumetanide also inhibit the co-transportation that happens with sodium. So here also with 1 sodium, 1 potassium and 2 chlorides are coming in, and this will be inhibited by furosemide or bumetanide, whichever high sealing diuretic you are using. Okay. Take down Again, this will lead to a load on site 4. Okay. Again, this will lead to a load on site 4. Mechanism of action. This class of drugs inhibit sodium, potassium and 2-chloride ion co-transportation. This class of drugs inhibit sodium, potassium and 2-chloride ion co-transportation. Next point, they enhance the urinary loss of potassium and hydrogen ions. They enhance the urinary loss of potassium and hydrogen ions. Last point, this however will increase the load of sodium reabsorption. This however will increase the load of sodium reabsorption at site 4. At site 4. Uses. It is used in the treatment of edema, which is caused due to congestive heart failure, nephrotic syndrome, and a cirrhosis of liver. Congestive heart failure, cirrhosis of liver, and nephrotic syndrome. All of them cause edema. You can use furosemide or bumetanide to get rid of the edema caused due to these 3 chronic conditions. Okay, so with this we finish with the loop diuretics also. You can take down the synthesis of furosemide, or you can take a screenshot of it and you can note it down later. If you have any questions, post it. Ask them now in the chat box. Okay, you don't have any questions. So yesterday I have sent the syllabus for your sessional. Your medicinal chemistry 2 sessional is on the 24th. I would prefer you coming online over here in the GoToMeeting app and writing the sessional. Okay, this time you will switch on your cameras and I will switch off my camera. I would like to see all 60 of you all writing the sessional in front of me. I will give the question paper also on the GoToMeeting app, like how I am showing you this slide. I will give you the question paper also like this only. Okay, so have you understood? You have any questions about it? No. Okay, fine. So 24th we are having a sessional. Tomorrow we'll finish this topic of diuretic agents. Another 2-3 classes are left of diuretic agents. So we'll finish them tomorrow. Around some 3-4 examples are left more. So tomorrow we'll finish these examples, and then next week we will take revision. We will take assignments. I will send you assignments. We have not taken any assignments since starting. So I'll send you assignments. You all can write the assignments. You all can share it with me. And then on the 24th, you will be writing your sessional. This topic is there for your sessional exam. So if you want, I can repeat the syllabus that you have for your sessional exam. Unit 1, entire Unit 1, entire Unit 2, and from Unit 3, you have only antiarrhythmic agents. Okay. You don't have antihyperlipidemic and coagulant anticoagulants. You don't have drugs used in congestive heart failure also. Okay. So this is your syllabus for your first sessional, which is happening on the 24th. Is it clear to everybody? Any questions? Okay, fine. We can end the class then.